Hey Matt. Well, first off,
Hi, Ethan.
it's a pleasure to talk to you, to the most prolific blogger of them all, and it's great to have you on to discuss this. And secondly, I want to establish that I am not evil, and I am not against I'm not against small market teams. You can be the judge of that. I just my personal belief, and I will let you establish, and I'll respond. My personal belief is just that we don't need to rig the game to balance the scales out from a competitive standpoint. I'm for more revenue sharing, but I don't believe that small market teams are at a great loss when it comes to competing in the NBA. And we can take it from there, and I'd love to hear your response on that thought.
The big problem with this issue is that it becomes polarized, right? So, if you say small market teams can compete, then immediately I jump to the reaction of, oh, you think everything's totally fine in a league where the Lakers made 31 of 63 finals and all these other things, and that the Lakers, Celtics, Knicks, Bulls, they have all these championships, and the Spurs are a great exception. And then on the flip side of it, once I react to that, you immediately jump to the conclusion, or not, I'm not saying you do. A lot of people will jump to the conclusion that I'm like, oh, we need to totally give all the small market teams all of these handouts and make it to where it's completely even. I think that there's a compromise to be had there, and the NBA will probably find it because people like Jeannie Buss and James Dolan and the guys that have the money have come out and said, we need to do this. We understand that this is going to have to be part of it. We understand the revenue sharing is going to have to happen. I'm not talking about there being this, massive change to hugely punish the rich teams and greatly benefit the small teams. I'm simply saying that we argue basically over the gap. That's what we're really talking about is how big the gap is. How hard is it for a small market team to compete? How much money do you have to be able to spend? How much help do you have to be able to get in order to compete with these inherent advantages? And because I've been going over this issue for 2 years, you'd think that I'd be more of an expert on it. And instead, I find myself all the more confused and oftentimes perplexed by some of the complexities of it, including the fact that when you get down to it, players are going to want to play in LA more than they're going to want to play in Minnesota. Like, that's never going to happen. You're going to want to live somewhere warm. I live in the Midwest. I don't like it here. So I totally understand kind of
Hmm.
that feeling. And so I think that you have to have something to kind of counteract those kind of balances. There's only going to be to a certain degree. Yes, like the Lakers and the Celtics and the Knicks and the Bulls are going to have more success. But there should be reasons that, like, the fact that the Milwaukee Bucks have struggled for so long, despite relatively, even not, if you don't think they're great ownership, pretty decent ownership. If you look at some of these other teams, I mean, the Indiana Pacers get ragged on because of the last 5 years, but that team poured a ton of money, into being able to compete at times through the early 2000s. And while they did have success, they never got over that hump, and that's what we determine success by. And furthermore, it imploded, and when it implodes for a small market team, it takes them forever to get back. Versus, the Knicks were horrible, and they're always using the example. Well, the Knicks, obviously big market teams don't have a huge advantage because the Knicks sucked. Okay, the Knicks sucked because they had the worst manager in the history of professional sports. And even then, all it took was getting good management in 2 years, and they were back in business. Now, you can talk about that being the value of good management, sure, but there's also an inherent issue there. So all we're really talking about is trying to shorten the gap.
Um, I believe the gap
Yeah.
is one more of profitability than it is about competitiveness, and I don't want small market teams going under, but I don't think that I kind of feel like the recent success of big market teams is a solution in search of a problem, and I know you do, that's the opinion that you don't like, and that's the one that makes you a bit angry. The recent success of the league is mainly due to Chicago, LA, and New York suddenly becoming relevant and boosting the ratings, and there is a force multiplier effect to be had, in my opinion, from when a big city is engaged in your product, engaged in the NBA product, then they talk about it more and it builds on itself. So I feel like the discussion should be, or I would prefer the discussion be, let's have revenue sharing to make sure that small market teams can compete and don't go under, and that if you're an owner and you want to buy one of those teams, it can be feasible to do so. But when we already have the NBA draft evening up the kind of evening up the odds for a lot of teams and helping teams out. And we have bird rights, or at least we did. We don't know what's going to happen in the new CBA. When we have that, that's enough. And I don't think that we should worry about making it any easier to compete for small market teams. I don't see any reason to do that.
Well, okay, let's start here. So one of the things that you brought up is obviously the most recent success, right? Like, oh, well, look how much success the league has had. How is that working out for us right now? Because if you can tell me what to write on at this point, I'd love to hear it, because I got nothing, because we're in a freaking lockout for the foreseeable future, because that success does not carry over to overall health of the league. And that's what we end up talking about is, look, if Adam Silver were to sit down and talk to me, Stern would never take my call or see me ever because I'm a lowly peon, but I think I could probably get Smithers on the phone for a little bit. And he were to tell me, look, we've done feasibility studies, and they have said that having all 30 teams have strong fan bases, but not have major markets be that much more ahead, have more of the interest and the success distributed throughout the rest of the league. We've done studies, and it's been shown that is not going to end up with a greater profit margin for the league in general than this current model. Then I'd be all ears. They're obviously never going to divulge that information because that's proprietary, but that's what I'm looking for is some sort of proof, because then I look at sports in general, and here's where we start getting into comparisons, which people don't like, and I understand that. But even if you remove other comparisons to other sports, you have to look at it from the perspective of, having 30 active markets, 30 active regions, not just localized cities, but regions heavily invested, pumping in money in merchandising and in TV revenue and in looking for all these things. All of these things that add up to contribute to BRI, that's significantly going to help the overall health of the league. It's not just that. Versus, depending on basically being like, well, okay,
but somebody has to lose
$1 billion. What?
I was saying somebody has to
absolutely
lose, even in the NFL.
Yeah, somebody has to lose.
They have parity, but some teams are bad every year.
Right, but shouldn't it be cyclical? Because that's the whole problem, right? Is that it's not cyclical. It's cyclical for the big teams to be good, and then bad, and then good again. And then for the rest of the teams, it's largely bad, and then maybe they get Tim Duncan, and then maybe they have a few runs of a couple playoff years, and then they're bad again for the foreseeable future, and there's no real cycle to it. And so I think that's part of the big concern. If you want to talk about profitability, yeah, I mean, I think that's the reality of it, right? So everyone talks about, the owners are talking about competitive balance and parity because they want us to buy into their concept, because they want us to support them and be like, oh, sure, you can totally hammer the players into nothingness because you're obviously concerned about the health of the league. And that's not true. They're concerned about profitability. If you make the Maloofs and the Wallace, or the Heisleys, pardon me, and even I guess the Jordans from a certain perspective, if you make them happy from a financial perspective, then they're going to be not as concerned. Then they're totally fine with the Lakers doing it. My issue then is, if you take them as two separate instances, one, success is heavily tied to profitability, obviously, and two, I don't follow the league in order to watch a bunch of Washington Generals get wiped off the floor by the Los Angeles Globetrotters. I don't watch it for that. I think that there's more interest in the sport, and it's better for the sport overall to have a high level of competitive.